Well, hello everybody. Rhonda Craig here. Lesson number 38. I'm just going to tell you right off the bat, I'm having a bad hair day. You're just going to have to put up with it. I wanted to tell you, first of all, I did number 37, and it was my interpretation, and I used the word extraterrestrial. And so I made a short little clip, 37B, to clarify that. Uploaded the wrong one, had to delete it. I'm sure some of you went and watched that old one. Anyway, I uploaded the right one. It's only 2 or 3 minutes long, but I'm going to cover it right quick. I used the word extraterrestrial when I talked about God. And I can just see somebody saying, she thinks he is an alien. I didn't say that. I said, God is not human. He's not of this world. And that's what extraterrestrial means. Not of this world. This earth, this planet. He isn't. And the term extraterrestrial sort of describes that. And I said in there that he doesn't fly around in flying saucers, although he could if he wanted to. But anyway, I just wanted to clarify that. I wanted to go back real quickly and say we covered the birth of Jesus. And I don't know that I explained when the wise men came that I did in an earlier one that when the wise men, the Magi came, that there's not scientific, there's evidence. Scholars believe that they were descendants of Daniel from the Far East because they came. They would have had knowledge if they were descendants of Daniel who stayed in, instead of going back to Jerusalem, they would have, and their descendants would have stayed there. and his descendants would have been the wise men. So anyway, just wanted to clear that up. And I also wanted to show you this. There are 50, I want to show you. There's 1 page, 2 pages, 3 pages, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 pages that I have studied of the fulfillment of the prophecy about Jesus, where he was going to be born. There's 8 pages of it, scriptures in the Old Testament, prophesying about a Messiah. And that Messiah, of course, if you're of Christian heritage, we believe was Jesus, because he fulfilled all of those things. And in my studies, it shows in the Old Testament where it was prophesied, and then where it was fulfilled. So I just wanted to bring that out. Also, I want to go back and say that what the New Testament, the book, the New Testament, is, it's a collection of 27 books. And the first 4 are the Gospels, or the good news. And the good news is God has taken the form of man and has come to give us a way out and establish his kingdom here on this earth. Of course, they thought it was going to be an earthly kingdom, but the good news is God has sent his Son, or himself, to this earth to bring peace and all the love that he has for us. The first 4 are of the Gospels, and 3 of the first ones are called the Synoptic Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke. They all give an account of Jesus' birth. I think they all have something about John the Baptist in there. None of them have much about his childhood, except when he was overlooked and left in Jerusalem when they went for the feast of the Passover, and when they got to settle down that night, he wasn't with them. And when they went back to find him, he was in the temple. That's the only thing we really have about his childhood. But the Synoptic Gospels, those three, have his ministry. And they tell it from, like Matthew tells it from his perspective. They all agree. There's no discrepancies, really, big discrepancies. But they give a list. Mark, see his ministry, his death, his on the cross, his resurrection, his ascension. And Luke, in his writings, that was intended to be the first volume, and the second volume of his writings was the Acts of the Apostles, which follows the four Gospels. The Gospel of John is a little different. He approaches it from a spiritual, more of a spiritual angle, and he says he is proving that Jesus is the Son of God. He is heavenly, divine. And John is, he writes other things besides just the Gospel of John. There are, I said there was four. The next 7 or 8, depending on whether or not you want to include Hebrews in that, the next 7 are, or 8 are, I'm sorry, there's 13. I got ahead of myself. There's 13, and these are the ones, and I'm just going to put them right here so you can see it again. I've done this at another time. The 13, these are letters assumed to be written by the Apostle Paul to various churches. And because of his unique encounter with the Lord Jesus, and I'll talk more about him later, his insights for the churches in the different areas where he had his missionary journeys, he would write to them and encourage them, and because they weren't acquainted, they didn't know how they weren't sure about the teachings, and so he in his writings, and in so doing, we have that account that helps us know what's expected of us. The next ones after those 13, and let me just read them to you. It's Romans, 1st and 2nd Corinthians, Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians, 1st and 2nd Thessalonians, 1st and 2nd Timothy, Titus, and Philemon. Those were all letters written by Paul the Apostle. The next 8 letters were written, and they're just called letters, and they're just various authors. And included in this one is Hebrews. We have Hebrews, James, the brother of Jesus, wrote James, and there's 1st and 2nd Peter, and that Peter was an apostle, and we have 1st and 2nd and 3rd John. That's the same John that wrote the Gospel of John, and Jude, which is Bible scholars say that was Thaddeus, one of the apostles or the disciples, and then some scholars say that there was just 7. So, and they say that the last one is Revelation, and it's the apocalyptic vision of John when he was on the island of Patmos, I believe is the name of it. Anyway, I just kind of wanted to give you that overview of the New Testament and the synopsis of the New Testament before we go on to Jesus' ministry. The Acts, I've told you what the Gospels were. And when you get to the Acts of the Apostles, it was intended, like I said, to be the second volume of a single unit, beginning with Luke, and this book it picks up the story of Jesus' resurrection, and the early disciples, and they were commissioned to witness to the world. And it's a chronological history of the church, of its beginnings. And then we have the epistles, and the first 14 of these letters are called the epistles of Paul. Epistle means letter, and 7 of the letters following the epistles of Paul are called. And now this one that I read, some of this research work's called Catholic epistles. That doesn't mean the Catholic Church. That means the universal epistles, because they are addressed to the church as a whole rather than to a specific church community. First and second and third letters of John attribute their authorship to John the Evangelist, and the letter of Jude attributes itself to Jude, the brother of James, who is elsewhere identified as one of Jesus' brothers. You know, there was 2 Jameses, though. And I'm not going to get into all of that, because that's scholarly stuff, and I just want to acquaint you with the New Testament. And I'm not going to get into book, chapter, and verse about Jesus' ministry either. You know, nothing was written until, like, I think it was 70 or 80 A.D. The Gospels were not. And his ministry was in 30 A.D. That's a long time. And so they were written, that was written possibly after some of Paul's letters were written. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. We want to talk tonight just a little bit about Jesus' ministry. And in lesson number 37, I told you about the new covenant is of love. That was the whole purpose. God's not a bloodthirsty ogre, and he wanted to show the world, this earth, mankind, that he is a loving, caring, compassionate God. And they were tuned into that covenant, the cutting of the blood covenant. And so he sent John the Baptist to clear the way and say, I want you to go, and it was his cousin, I want you to go and clear the way and tell them the Messiah's coming. And it's in the lineage of David. And of course, they immediately think it's going to be another one kingdom like it was under David. Of course they did. And the world that they were living in at the time was horrific. They were under Roman rule, and it was harsh. And they wanted their freedom physically. They wanted their nation back. They wanted it to be like it was that their ancestors told them about. So, saying all of that, when Jesus came and started his ministry, the first miracle that he did was at the wedding Cana. And I just want to say right now, if you haven't seen or watched the TV series The Chosen, now I know there are religious groups who say, oh no, that you shouldn't be taking the liberty of creating fictional material with the Gospels and about Jesus. But let me tell you, if you watch The Chosen, those disciples will come to life to you. Jesus will come to life to you. What he was about will come to life to you, because and you'll see that they're not old bearded men. They were young. They were probably late teenagers, early 20s. They were young. And when Jesus when he picked those disciples, he picked them for a reason. They were all from all walks of life. And he mentored them. He discipled them. Disciple means to teach them. And they followed him. They weren't married. Peter was. Simon. They called him Simon. Simon Peter. He was the only one that we know of that was married. And I want to talk a little bit about those disciples who became apostles, and tell you a little bit about what is going on with them. But the main concept that I want to get across to you is Jesus came to teach us how to love our God, how to love each other, and to have compassion. And I just jotted down some things that he taught. See if I can find them here. He healed the sick. He healed the lame. He healed the blind. He fed the hungry. He did away with the demons that were tormenting people. And they still torment people today. If you have a spirit of tormenting spirit that just keeps telling you you're not worthy, that's a tormenting spirit. You need to get rid of it. He spoke with authority, which, by the way, he passed on to us to have that same kind of authority. He taught us to love children. In fact, he said, unless you become like a little child. So when you get exasperated with a child, just remember, that's who you're trying to become like. Because they're innocent, they're pure, and their love is so unfettered. And they have a direct line to God. And their angel sees the face of God, so be careful the way you treat children. He prayed for his enemies. He taught them to forgive. He honored his mother. He taught them to honor their mother and to honor their fellow man. As a matter of fact, his whole thing said, the whole law and prophets is love the Lord your God with all your heart and soul. And the second one is like unto it, to love your neighbor as yourself. Now that's saying a lot. Think about that. Love your neighbor. That means anybody else that comes across your path. Treat them like you want to be treated. I was brought up with the golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And boy, we have just abandoned that one and said, do unto others before they have a chance to do it to you, or do unto others just like they do to you. No. That's what God sent his son. That's why he came, was to teach us a better way. And the scriptures also say, love covers a multitude of wrongs. Some of the other things that he did, he bound up the brokenhearted. Whenever you read the story about how his good friend Lazarus died, and the sisters Mary and Martha sent for him to come because he was sick, and Jesus tarried and didn't go right away. And by the time he got there, Lazarus was already dead and in the tomb, and they were mourning and crying, and he said, "Don't cry. He'll be raised." And she said, "Well, we know he's going to be raised in the afterlife, but if you'd have come sooner, he wouldn't have died." And Jesus had compassion, and he knew in the next few minutes he was going to go in there and raise his friend from the dead. But what did he do? He had compassion on those two sisters who were crying and mourning for their brother. And the shortest verse in the Bible is Jesus wept. So he had that kind of compassion. he had great respect for faith, people of faith, and he taught that if you have the faith of a little piece of mustard seed, it'll move a mountain. Those are the kinds of things that he taught. And he taught in the kinds of language that the people could understand. They called them parables. And most of all, he taught that the kingdom is coming. Of course, they thought it was an earthly kingdom, but it wasn't. It was a spiritual kingdom that he was coming. And he exhibited all the fruits of the Spirit, the love and joy, peace, long-suffering or patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Those are all fruits of the Spirit that we are encouraged to acquire or to do. And it said that's how people will know that we belong to Christ, is if we exhibit those qualities. There's tons more. Generosity. And of course, I write rewires, and positive words create bigger brain spells, but they also they generate positive energy, positive retraining of your brain. And that's what Christ is wanting you to do. Because the negative things are the swarming evil, and those are the ones that have the low frequency of vibration according to science and the Bible. And they have a detrimental effect on your body. But the positive words and the positive behaviors have a wonderful effect on our bodies and our immune system, and there's scientific evidence to prove all of that now. And so tonight I'm just going to leave you with the thought that Jesus was the most unusual, unique teacher ever to hit the planet. Now, of course, if you're an American, you've grown up under those kinds of teachings. Our laws, everything reflect that because our country had a covenant with God. Even the people who don't believe there's a God have grown up enjoying the fruits of being a Christian nation because of the teachings of Jesus. And we call them the Judeo-Christian principles. I just feel sorry for people who can't get a hold of that. Of course, our government everything has been swarmed with evil. But God has a remnant, and he will not be defeated. I'm going to leave you with that tonight. Hopefully when we come back again, we're going to talk about his death. I hope I can get through that. You guys have a good one.